The Expert Series returns after a top 10k finish last season and have expanded the panel from 50 to 100, and I've asked them for their first draft and crunched all the numbers on ownerships, formations and premiums. Get this one to 500 likes and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Now, the big question that we want to know, are the experts going with Haaland? Are they going with Salah as their premium? Are they doubling up with both? Or are they ignoring them altogether? Well, this was the big question, wasn't it? And I've been really surprised by the experts' results. First of all, those going just Salah dominate here. 45% have decided to go just Salah without Haaland in their sides. But then 33%, 1/3 of the experts, have decided to try and squeeze both into their side. So it'll be interesting to see later in the video the ownership of those budget players, which helps to afford having those two big premiums. I personally felt like maybe it wasn't viable, but now I've seen these numbers, I'm tempted to go have a tinker and see what sort of draft I can put together. The camp that we're on, just Haaland without Salah, is just 15%. I'm in that category, wanting to find out a bit more information from Liverpool in pre-season under Arne Slot before committing. 7%, so a massive minority, going with neither of these two. I'm of the feeling that if you're not going Haaland, you need to have Salah in your team. Having a look at the ownership stats then across the experts, starting with goalkeepers, and it's Matt Turner at 33% owned, who's the most popular, probably a backup for most managers here. Ward and Fabianski were the other notable 4 million options. It seems to be the 4.5 million goalkeepers which are getting the most love though, with Sanchez the most popular, 25% owned. Interestingly, a lot of appeal to whoever ends up being Chelsea's first choice goalkeeper, because we also have Petrovic at 11% and Kepa, who isn't even at the game, of 4% owned. So that just goes to show that 4.5 million goalkeeper spot for Chelsea could be gold. A lot of interest there. We just need to know from pre-season which one is going to get that #1 shirt. There's quite a lot of interest in Brentford's Mark Flecken, who's the alternative to the Chelsea goalkeeper at the 4.5 million price tag. He's selected by 24% as well. And interestingly, those goalkeepers priced at 5 million or over are not very well represented in the expert side. The only one with ownership above 10% is Arsenal's David Raya, with 13% of the experts going for him. But it looks like either we're going with two 4.5 million options rotating, or a 4.5 million and a 4 million backup. Moving on to defenders then, and looking at the price points here, when it comes to the premium options, it's Manchester City's Vardiol who comes out on top in around half of the expert sides. Trent Alexander-Arnold is another one quite popular, with around 30% of the vote as well. And it may look like Arsenal defenders aren't that popular, but they are. Gabriel and Saliba splitting the vote straight down the middle, 18% each. There was love for Timber, White and Tomiyasu as well, with around 47% of the experts going with one Arsenal defender or another. The thing that surprised me the most, Pedro Porro among the experts, only chosen by 4%. His ownership in the game is 25%, so massive discrepancy there. Similar for Trippier, not in a single experts draft, 16% owned in the game. So you can see where the cash is going for those that are wanting to pick a premium defender. Now, we are spoilt for choice in the 4.5 million category for this season, and you'll see Konza at 56% owned is very popular. We've got Anderson and Gay making the overall list here. Anderson at 51% owned. If you look even wider, 66% went for some form of Palace defender. Dan Burn, very popular at 47%, and Mikalenko at 25%. 31% was the general ownership for Everton defenders, but we're looking at those rotations between Everton and Palace players, Villa and Palace. You could even have all three and swap them all in and out. There's certainly lots of utility there at that price point. And if you are looking for the 4 million defenders to line your bench, Harwood Bellis at 56% is the one to go to, without Vez at 20%, another option if you're going with 2 4 million defenders. Moving on to midfielders, and this was the shock. Mo Salah, just over 30% owned in the game right now, but among my experts in 84% of sides. And add into the mix that 10% of managers also own a different Liverpool midfielder. It seems that Liverpool's great opening fixtures are making them very popular picks. And I look at this and I think, have I made a mistake not including Salah in my first draft? Now, the other thing that really surprised me, if you look at the ownership on FPL at the moment, Palmer in the top couple of most owned players, over 50%. In the expert side, only 22% have gone with Palmer. They're actually looking at that cheaper option of Nkunku from Chelsea, who's in 50% of sides. So it's very different ownership here to maybe what you'd predict if you looked at the FPL website. We've got Saka, who's on a very similar ownership to Odegaard. It looks like the experts aren't that bothered about owning an Arsenal midfielder and a bit undecided on whether Saka's worth that extra 1.5 million. And Son and De Bruyne, less than 5% of the experts decided to go with them, which is really interesting in this premium category. Now, if we look more to the mid-priced options for the midfield, Gordon, very popular at 71%, Eze, 53%. They're pretty well backed in the game in general. Gibbs White as well is a big trend among the experts in around a quarter of these first drafts of those polled. And, you know, if you're looking for the budget enablers, Hudson-Odoi's got a pretty good run of traction at 11%, and if you need that 4.5 million midfielder in a 3-4-3 formation, it's Winks that the experts are favouring at this point in pre-season. Moving on to forwards, Erling Haaland around 30% owned in FPL at the moment. The experts, it's closer to 50-50. He is an option that a lot of the experts are still considering, despite that increase in price by 1 million to 15 million. But the player who's the most owned across all the expert sides is Newcastle United's Alexander Isak. He's pretty much a must-have at this point, according to the experts. Watkins not as popular at 44%, a little bit lower than his ownership within the game at the moment. And then we see João Pedro, who was a bit of a bandwagon, around 50% of the experts looking at him. However, we do now know he's not going to attend Brighton's pre-season tour in Asia, so that means that maybe you need to look to different budget options for the forwards. And Chris Wood at 9% owned is one under consideration here. We've also got Ladepo, 7%, who could be the one 4.5 million to have on your bench if you are going for a 3-5-2. Interestingly, no mention of Tony, Mateta, Darwin Núñez in these experts' first drafts. Gakpo only owned by 4%, and Solanke, a big surprise here, only 4% going with him in their squads as well. So a lot to take on board there and unpack in the ownership stakes. Let's have a look at the experts' general shortlist then. I've gone with players here that are owned by over 10% of the experts within their drafts, and I've split them up by category. So for the goalkeepers, the premiums, it is only Raya, but it's those at 5 million or over. We've got the mid-priced, which is those at 4.5 million, and then the budget picks at 4 million. Similar pricing structure for the defenders as well. 5 million or over is the premium category here. Moving into the midfielders, and the goalposts have changed here in terms of the premiums. The premiums were looking at 9 million or over, the mid-price looking at over 6 million, and the budget looking at 5.5 million and below. When it comes to the forwards, it's a very small pool that all of the experts were exploring here. Only Haaland in that premium category over 10 million. Then we've got the mid-priced, which is players coming in at 6.5 million or above. And the budget picks 6 million and below. João Pedro with that orange flag for now. This video was in members early access, and that's something that I'm doing for channel members throughout pre-season, so check out that join button to see the perks. Let's get this one to 500 likes, so we're on the road to 35k subs for the game week 1 deadline. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next installment of the Experts series with the mistakes to avoid. Thank you for watching.